The Sunday brunch was like any other in my family. The table was covered with fancy food. The sunlight streamed through the big restaurant windows. Everyone was dressed nicely, smiling and chatting. My grandfather, the kind and generous man I loved most, beamed at me from across the table. He raised his glass of mimosa. "My girl," he said, his voice warm and proud. "I'm so glad you're enjoying the apartment I got for you." The air in the room suddenly stilled. I froze, the sweet orange juice I was sipping now burning like acid in my throat. Eyes darted toward me from every direction. My mom's perfectly painted lips parted in confusion. My sister looked up from her phone, intrigued. And my dad dropped his fork. It hit his porcelain plate with a sharp, loud clink that echoed in the sudden silence. Before we go further, I'd love to know who's listening. Where are you joining from? Tell me your city in the comments below. And after you've heard my whole story, be honest. What would you have done in my situation? Tell me in the comments. We read every single one. Now, let's begin. I could feel my heartbeat pounding behind my eyes. The silence grew dense and heavy. I glanced down, wiped my hands nervously on the napkin in my lap, and then looked up at my grandfather. His happy smile was still there, waiting for my reply. "I live in a basement," I whispered. His smile faltered. "What? I never got any apartment," I said, louder this time. My voice was even and steady. I was determined not to cry here, not after all these years of holding it in. A deep hush dropped over the table like a dark storm cloud. I could feel the truth of it in my bones. "What are you talking about?" Grandpa asked, blinking slowly, as if his brain couldn't process my words. The whole room seemed to shift. My mom reached for her coffee, her hands trembling just enough to spill a small, brown drop onto the white tablecloth. My sister stopped chewing her food. My dad coughed, then reached for his water like something was stuck in his throat. "Truth," I said, looking around at all of them. "You never sent me anything, Grandpa. I've been living in a windowless basement for 4 years. The only gift I've gotten from this family in a decade was silence." "Wait, hold on," Grandpa said, pushing his chair back a few inches. He looked genuinely confused and concerned. "I wired the down payment to your dad 4 years ago. He told me he surprised you with it after your college graduation." My mouth went completely dry. A cold shiver ran up my spine, but I forced myself to breathe slowly and stay calm. My dad's face had gone pale, almost ashen. My mom turned to him slowly, her voice a tight, worried whisper. You said you helped her find a cute little place downtown." "Dad?" I asked, locking my eyes with his. "Is that true?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unable to hold my gaze. I meant to. Things were complicated." "No," I cut in, my voice sharp and clear. "You meant to keep it." A sharp gasp escaped from someone's lips at the table. My grandfather sat back in his chair, his lips pressed together in a thin line. His knuckles were white, where he was gripping the edge of the table. He looked like he'd been physically sucker-punched. I sat up straighter, my voice steady but sharp as a blade. "You told me to work harder, to stop expecting handouts. All that time, you let me scrub other people's floors and work 2 dead-end jobs, while you pocketed the money that was meant to give me a start in life." The air around the table was venomous now, thick, hot and crackling with unspoken truths that were finally breaking free. I stood up, my hands still shaking, my heart pounding. "I wasn't going to say anything today," I said to everyone at the table. "But since we're celebrating birthdays, maybe it's time we all stop pretending." And with that, I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard chairs screeching as they were pushed back. I heard fumbling footsteps. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The hallway outside the restaurant was quiet, but the rage boiling inside me was a roaring storm. I could still feel every pair of eyes on me from that table. The shock, the guilt, the discomfort. For once, it was a discomfort they truly deserved. I didn't cry. Not this time. As I reached the parking lot, I heard fast footsteps behind me. "Kayla, wait!" It was my grandfather's voice. I turned around. He looked older than he had just 20 minutes ago. His warm smile was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen on his face in years. Pure, unfiltered sorrow. "You seriously never got the apartment?" he asked, his voice full of pain. I shook my head, the reality of my life pouring out. "I've been renting a basement from a woman who smokes so much the walls are yellow. There's a loud boiler right next to my bed. I pay my rent in cash because she doesn't believe in banks. I've eaten dinner sitting on the floor more nights than I can even count." He swallowed hard. "Your father, he said you didn't want help, that you were being independent." My chest rose with a bitter breath. "I asked him for a job lead once. Just one. You know what he said? He said, and I quote, 'Try flipping burgers first.' He called me entitled." My grandfather's eyes flicked down to the ground, filled with shame. "He told me you were ungrateful, that you moved into your dream place without even thanking him." A bitter, hurt laugh escaped my lips. I didn't know there was anything to thank him for. He rubbed a hand over his tired face and sighed a heavy, world-weary sigh. I trusted him, he whispered, more to himself than to me. I didn't reply. The silence stretched between us, but for the first time, it didn't feel awkward or painful. It felt necessary. Then he said something that truly surprised me. I want to fix this. I folded my arms, protectively. How? I want to see where you live. My head snapped up. Why? Because if it's as bad as you say, and I believe you, then he didn't just steal from you, Kayla. He stole from both of us. And I am done letting anyone lie to me. That night, I drove my grandfather to my place. He didn't say much as I led him down the crumbling concrete steps to the basement door. A single, flickering bulb lit our way. The scent of old cigarettes and damp mildew greeted us as I unlocked the door. I stepped aside. "Welcome to my palace," I said, my voice flat. He stepped inside slowly. I watched as his eyes traveled around the single room. He saw the second-hand couch with the broken spring, the bookcase leaning dangerously to one side, the stained ceiling tiles, the tiny, narrow bed pushed up against the rumbling laundry machine. His face didn't change for several long seconds. He just took it all in. Then, he walked over and sat on the edge of my bed, letting out the saddest, most defeated exhale I had ever heard in my life. "This," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "This is what you've been living in?" I nodded, leaning against the doorframe. "Since college ended." His eyes got glassy with unshed tears. He said he was saving the rest of the money for your wedding. I thought it made sense at the time. "There is no rest," I said, my voice hollow. "You gave him $70,000, Grandpa." That money disappeared the moment it hit his account. Grandpa looked at the stained concrete floor, then back at me, a new fire igniting in his eyes. "Not anymore," he said, standing up with a new determination. "Tomorrow, we're going to the bank. And to my lawyer. And after that, I think your dad and I need to have a very long conversation." I didn't smile, but deep inside, something stirred. It was a shift, a cracking feeling, like I had finally broken the glass wall everyone else had been watching me through for years. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of burnt coffee and the sound of my grandfather on the phone. His voice was different, cold, hard, like steel. "I don't care if it's Sunday, Howard," he was saying to his lawyer. "Find the paperwork. I want every transfer traced, every single cent. And I want you to draft a letter stating, I no longer authorize Daniel Whitmore to act on my behalf in any financial capacity." I stayed in the hallway, barefoot on the cold concrete, listening in silence. Something inside me, something that had felt small and forgotten for so long, finally felt seen. Truly seen. By noon, we were sitting in a crisp, wood-paneled office downtown. Grandpa had pulled strings to get an emergency meeting. The banker, a serious woman in her 50s, clicked through records on her computer, her lips pressed tightly together. "I do see the transfer here," she said finally, adjusting her glasses. She turned the monitor toward us. "From Mr. Whitmore's account to Daniel Whitmore, your son. It's marked as a, quote, gift for Kayla's condo." There it was. The date, the exact amount, $70,000. Everything Grandpa had said was true. Then she clicked again, and my heart dropped into my stomach. The screen now showed another transfer, made just 5 days later. My dad had moved the entire amount into a separate investment account, under his own name only. There was no mention of me. No note. It was just gone. My hands curled into tight fists in my lap. My grandfather stared at the screen in utter silence for a moment. Then, in a deceptively calm voice, he asked, "Can I get a printed copy of all that?" "Yes, sir," the banker said, and stepped away to get the papers. When she was gone, he turned to me. "He betrayed you," he said, his voice low and steady. "And he lied to me. This isn't just family drama, Kayla. It's theft." I nodded slowly, the truth finally, officially, confirmed. "Don't worry," he added. "I'll handle it." But I shook my head. "No," I said quietly, finding a new strength in my voice. "We'll handle it." That afternoon, we drove straight to my parents' house. I hadn't stepped foot there in years. This was the house where I used to decorate cupcakes with my mom, where my dad once taught me how to ride a bike, before he started ignoring my calls, where my sister threw a party the week I moved out and left my stuff on the front lawn. Grandpa rang the doorbell. My dad opened the door, looking half confused, half annoyed. His eyes widened when he saw both of us standing there. "We need to talk," Grandpa said, his voice firm. "I'm kind of busy," my dad started to say. "Sit down." Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The authority in his tone was absolute. My mom hovered in the background, her brows furrowed in worry. My sister peeked down the staircase, sensing tension. We all gathered in the living room. Grandpa placed the thick folder from the bank on the coffee table. My dad didn't even look at it. Then, Grandpa dropped the hammer. You told me Kayla was living in that apartment I bought for her, but the money never made it to her. You took it, you stole it, and you lied to your daughter, and you lied to me. My dad chuckled nervously. Come on, Dad. You're blowing this way out of proportion. She's been living in a basement. Grandpa snapped, his calm finally breaking. She's been eating on the floor, working 2 jobs, while you used her money to pad your own investments. I was holding it for her future. My dad insisted, his voice rising. Don't, my voice cut in, sharp and clear. I looked right at him. Just don't lie again. You told me I was lazy, entitled, that I didn't deserve help. Meanwhile, you were living off the money that was meant to give me a chance. My dad's jaw clenched, but he had no words. Grandpa opened the folder and slid the bank statements toward him. I've already spoken to Howard. We will pursue legal action if we have to, but you are going to pay back every single cent with interest. And you are going to explain yourself in front of the whole family at the next brunch. No more secrets. No more pretending you're some noble father. My mom whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel, tell me this isn't true. He said nothing. The silence from him was a confession. Then Grandpa turned to me. You'll move in with me next week. I've already called a realtor. We'll find you a proper place to live. I stared at my dad one last time. He couldn't meet my eyes. The man who once told me, you'll never make it without me, looked incredibly small now, shrinking under the crushing weight of his own truth. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, and that feeling was so much better. The following Sunday, brunch was held at the same restaurant, at the same table, with the same faces. But everything had changed. I wasn't seated near the end anymore, squeezed between an ice bucket and a wobbly chair. This time, I sat beside my grandfather at the head of the table. His hand rested lightly on mine, as we waited for everyone to arrive, a silent show of solidarity. When my dad walked in, he looked like he'd aged 5 years in 1 week. The usual fake charm was gone from his face. My mom stayed close to him, tight-lipped and tense. My sister wore sunglasses indoors, as if she didn't want to see what was about to happen. Grandpa stood up before anyone could pick up a menu and pretend this was a normal family gathering. I'm going to keep this short, he said, his voice sharp and loud enough for the entire room to quiet down. I've invited everyone here because last week, I learned that a grave injustice was done in my name. 4 years ago, I sent money, my own savings, to help Kayla start her adult life. I was told she received it. I was told she was thriving. He turned slightly toward me. His eyes were full of a protective love I had so missed. That was a lie. The room went completely still. A server froze mid-pour, holding a pitcher of water in the air. I looked up, feeling the familiar burn of tears behind my eyes, but I held them back. This wasn't about tears anymore. This was about strength, Grandpa continued. Daniel took that money. He invested it, hid it, and then let his own daughter suffer in silence. He made her feel unworthy, lazy, and dependent, all while pretending he was being a responsible parent. A wave of murmurs rolled through the family members seated around us. My aunt gasped. My cousin blinked hard, piecing together years of comments and situations. My dad shifted in his seat, his face a mask of shame. Grandpa turned fully toward him now. You betrayed both of us. And from this moment forward, you will not touch another cent of my estate. Every asset, every trust, every future transaction, it's all being restructured. You've lost that privilege. Then, slowly and deliberately, Grandpa pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. He laid it gently on the table in front of my father. I want you to read this, Grandpa said. Out loud. My dad looked at the paper as if it were poison. Now, Grandpa's voice sharpened, leaving no room for argument. My dad's hand shook as he picked up the letter and unfolded it. When he began to read, his voice was broken and weak. To my family, he read, haltingly. I stole from my daughter, Kayla Whitmore. I took funds meant for her future and lied about their purpose. I have wronged her, my father, and the integrity of this family. I accept full responsibility and will pay back the full amount within 6 months. I am deeply sorry. When he finished, there was only silence. No clapping, no more gasps. Just a heavy, collective breath held by everyone in the room. And for the first time in years, I looked at my father and didn't feel small. I felt seen. That night, back at Grandpa's house, we stood on the porch, under a sky full of bright stars. I still can't believe you never asked for anything, he said, his voice filled with regret. You never came to me. I was done asking, I replied softly. Asking him had only ever led to more pain. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'm sorry I didn't check on you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm not, I said after a thoughtful moment, because now I know, without a single doubt, who is really in my corner. He smiled a faint, sad smile. You're not going back to that basement. I know. I found a place for you, he added. It's downtown. Hardwood floors. Big, real windows that actually open to the sky. I laughed quietly, the sound feeling strange and wonderful. That already sounds like a mansion to me. You deserve it, he said, and he meant it. Maybe I did. But more than a nice apartment, more than the money, I deserved to stop fighting for scraps of love and respect. I deserved the truth. My new apartment had floor-to-ceiling windows. The first morning I woke up there, the sun streamed in so brightly, it felt like it had been waiting just for me. I didn't hear my landlady cursing at her dog through the wall. I didn't hear the old pipes groaning and banging beside my head. There was just silence, peace. I sat on the edge of my new bed, a real, comfortable bed, not a secondhand futon, and stared out at the city skyline. I wasn't used to seeing the sky like this, so open and full of possibility. I wasn't used to feeling safe in my own home. That same day, I started something I had buried years ago out of shame and exhaustion. I opened my laptop and dusted off a digital folder I used to keep hidden behind job applications and unpaid bills. The folder was labeled My Designs. Inside were the sketches and layouts I once dreamed would become my career. This was before the world convinced me that stability mattered more than passion. Before my dad looked at my portfolio and said, "It's cute, honey. But when are you going to get serious?" Now I got serious. I applied to design studios and freelance networks. I built a small, professional website to showcase my portfolio. I used the money Grandpa had secured for me not just to survive, but to start. Weeks passed, then months. One afternoon, I got a call. A respected local architecture firm had seen my online submissions. They were launching a new community housing project and needed someone who could think creatively about small spaces. I smiled during that phone call. I've lived that. I told them honestly. I understand making the most out of a small space better than anyone. When I walked into their bright, modern downtown office for the first interview, I wore the same beige coat my mom had once called cheap and childish. The receptionist offered me a bottle of water. The creative director shook my hand and offered me a seat at a real conference table. By the end of the meeting, I had a contract in my hand. It wasn't just a job. It was proof. Proof that I was never the failure they had painted me to be. Proof that living in a basement didn't mean I belonged beneath anyone. Months later, it was my turn to host the family brunch. Not in a restaurant. Not in someone else's house. In my home, I used real plates. The room was filled with real, easy laughter. Real, beautiful sunlight streamed through my big, clean windows. My grandfather brought a beautiful bouquet of flowers and set them in a vase I'd bought for myself with my very first paycheck from the architecture firm. My cousin, who used to roll her eyes when I talked about my art, leaned in and genuinely asked me about color palettes and mood boards. My dad wasn't there. He hadn't been back to a family gathering since the day he read that letter. He had repaid the money on time, but the apologies had stayed on paper. That was fine with me. I had learned that some people's absence is the greatest gift of all. As I passed around a tray of warm, fresh scones I had baked myself, I caught my grandfather watching me. A soft, proud smile was on his face. "This," he said, his voice warm and full of emotion. "This is what I had imagined for you all along." I reached over and touched his hand. "Me too, Grandpa," I said. "Me too."